Welcome veteran superhero Andrew Lancic. Today he will showcase premiering content in his session, Let Go of Your Spreadsheets and Start Planning in D365 F&SC. Please stick around after Andrew's session for a live Q&A.
Hi, I'm Andrew Lancic, and welcome to DynamicsCon Virtual. I want to thank DynamicsCon for putting on this amazing event. I've had the privilege of talking here before, and it's a lot of fun, and I think today we'll have a great session for you as well. There will be a live Q&A at the end of this event, so make sure to stay tuned where I can answer all the questions that you have queued up during the sessions. Let's go ahead and begin. My name is Andrew Lancic. I'm the Director of Delivery at Argonaut. I've been using master planning in Dynamics since AX 3.0, many versions ago. So I've seen all sorts of iterations of companies getting into complex discussions around how they want to do supply planning. And one of the ways I like to talk about master planning and keep it simple and keep it a little bit of fun is with Lego. So this session that we're going to have today is Let Go of Your Spreadsheets and Start Planning in Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management. A quick synopsis. So what is D365 Finance and Supply Chain Management? And why are we offering this course today? It's a full-scale master planning and scheduling solution that is provided in the ERP, and that replaces, hopefully, the mountains of Excel files you have and internal spreadsheets that you have. You'll be amazed at companies that have been around for as long as our country, and they're using things like Excel files and homegrown data sheets instead of using embedded functionality in their very expensive ERP systems. So the synopsis of this class is really, let's look at what tools are available. Let's look at that comprehensive suite of functionality and keep your Lego set stocked and on the shelf, or moving through the supply chain and shipping out to your happy customers. Because the most important thing is that we keep playing and we keep building our Lego. So what are we going to build today? What are we going to do here? Why am I sitting here with this Lego mug that has a bunch of funny things on it? And what does this really have to do with ERP? What does this have to do with master planning? We're going to start off with Lego facts, what makes Lego interesting, what makes Lego relevant to this discussion. We'll get into an overview of master planning in Dynamics 365 using Lego as our guide. Building blocks, what are the basics? What are the key ideas that we need to embed into our brains to understand how to configure the system to do what we want for our sales and operations and production planning processes? What are the complex things we need? The unique functionality that maybe drives capacity constraints, or that has to do with demand forecasting and using statistical analysis. We'll get into a demo and review the product, get into some real key features, do a little bit of navigation, play with some Lego in the system itself. We'll recap everything. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to do a live Q&A at the end of this where we can answer any and all of your questions on master planning. So let's get started with some Lego facts. And I put here a link, 100 fun facts you probably didn't know about Lego. What did Lego come from? This is a company that was founded in the 1930s. I think anybody who's listening to today is probably already familiar with Lego. Lego, the Danish word, means to play well, and the plural of Lego is Lego. That's something I actually just found out. I always referred to it as Legos, but you really want to say Lego or Lego set or Lego bricks. And why is this important? Well, if you look at the Lego group itself, as I mentioned, they've been around since the 1930s. They began including assembly instructions as early as 1964. You compare that to what we do with our manufacturers and our supply chain distributors. They're trying to figure out what level of instructions do they provide to their business. They're trying to figure out lead times to supply these assembled parts on time. And manufacturers always have to consider things like that and put them into their capacity planning and their resource planning. And do you have assembly instructions at the production user's interface? Do you provide them to the end user that's getting your product? And you may have to support it. One unique fact I don't have up here is if something breaks, if I lose this little propeller on my helicopter, I can simply call Lego customer service and get a replacement part free of charge. And to think about having to plan for all that extra capacity. How easy is it to lose a little Lego? They have to factor that into their planning. What parts do they need? How many do they need? How do they service their business and grow their business? So it's a great use case, a great company to prove why is master planning important, and what tools do I need to provide to be able to produce at volumes of 400 billion Lego bricks in the world every second. Over 1,300 Lego pieces are being made, 78,000 per minute, only almost 5 million per hour. That's a staggering amount. And to be able to factor in all the things you have to for that, whether it's your vendors or your production capacity, your distribution model and centers and how they plan. Is it centralized planning, or is it planning that's individualized and local to regions or sites or facilities? So that's why we're going to use Lego today in our master planning workshop. Let's take a look now at D365, give a little bit of a master planning overview. What is master planning? You might hear other ERP systems use terms like MRP, master resource scheduling, material requirements planning, production planning, advanced production scheduling. Well, D365 and Dynamics offer master planning, and this gives us the ability to configure master plans that support our operations, whether that's purchasing products in a pure buy-sell model, that could be producing in simple and complex manufacturing or kitting, that could be transferring inventory in between our own facilities like distribution warehouses. And it also includes factors for promising orders to our customers. How do we come up with our ship dates? How do we come up with our customer promise dates? Do we consider forecasts? Do we have statistical forecasts or basic forecasts? And if so, how does that affect our planning initiatives? And organizational policies. Do we have workflows? Do we have limits of what we can buy? Do we physically support what essentially the demand is in our business? And if not, how are we going to react to that? Are we going to add capacity, or are we going to buy a new building? Are we going to start outsourcing more? All these things are really important to consider to drive what we want master planning to do. If I'm in a company that's make to order versus make to stock, my master planning setup might be very, very different. So master planning is configured against master plans and calculates what we call net requirements. What are we going to buy? What are we going to produce? What are we going to transfer in order to meet demand needs, in order to meet our customer sales orders, our internal consumption, our safety stock levels, and consider any restrictions we may have on materials due to lead times or only being able to single source certain products. Do we have capacity constraints because of our workforce or because of weather or not having enough vendors in a certain area? Whatever it may be, we need to consider all that in master planning. So what really is that then in Dynamics 365? On the one side, we have all of our inputs. What are our sources of demand? Safety stock and reorder point levels. Sales demand, discrete sales orders, direct demand from our customers. Production demand, we consume components, we consume sub-assembled parts, and we now have a need to fulfill that in order to build our assembled goods and our finished goods. We have transfer demand, as we mentioned, shuffling inventory in and out of different centers of distribution based on where they're required. We could have forecasts, and those could be basic production or supply forecasts that drive what we build and they buy, or those could be complicated demand forecasts. Those could be things that tie into our customer selling strategy and our obsolescence and proceeding processes that we have for introducing new items or deprecating old items. Might even factor in sales quotes if there's quotes or customers that we are really sure are going to order something and we want to set a rate that determines if their sales quotes drive a forecasted order so we can plan for it because of maybe short lead times. Then do we want to configure sales quotes? And then obviously on top of all this, we have existing on-hand inventory. How does our on-hand inventory fulfill any open or new demand? And then on this right side, we kind of have this hierarchy. So we have our master plans, centralized, global in a sense, at least for a legal entity, where we plan at the first level. What are our master plans? How many master plans do we have? Then we have coverage groups, groups of items that have similar lead times or similar planning settings that should be grouped together when we generate planned orders and when we analyze our supply chain. Then you have the third level, the most granular level, item coverage. What are item-specific planning requirements? Where are items made? Where are items purchased? Where are items transferred? Where are our safety stock levels applied? Do we have overrides for any of the group settings that don't apply to a unique situation on a specific item? You see this in dual source, for example. If I make an item at one warehouse and transfer it to 5 other distribution facilities, I'm going to define that rule in my item coverage setup. It also considers other setups as well. So production, we need to consider our resources, our work cells, our assembly areas. Maybe those are subcontract vendor warehouses and resource groups that we need to consider. And we need to consider their calendars. A lot of people don't realize how many calendars you can configure in Dynamics. You have sales calendars that can apply to customers. You have vendor calendars that can apply to just vendors and what days they deliver on. You have calendars associated with modes of delivery, calendars associated with warehouses, calendars associated with your resources. Maybe a specific production line runs 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, but it only runs it 4 days a week. That's when calendars really come into play, and how you want to configure those calendars. How detailed do you want to get to run master planning in Dynamics? Do you want to go to that level, or do you want a more broad, basic planning structure? So to that point, let's take all of those inputs, all of that information, and produce planned orders. That's what master planning does. It produces planned orders. It produces messages and suggestions for how to alter planned orders and existing orders, purchase orders, sales orders, production, and so on, to give you all of the known information and actions you can take, but it's up to you as a planner to then act on them. So let's go a little bit further now, talk about some of those basics, and then get even further after that and talk about some of the more complicated options you have to meet your supply chain needs. What are the building blocks? This picture probably looks familiar to a lot of you, especially if you're parents. These are Duplo blocks. Very easy for young kids. They start with these. You don't immediately move them to the small, intricate Legos. There's lots of reasons for that, mainly choking, but also play. They can't physically start with those more complicated builds that they can't fit in their fingers. They can't figure out what they're supposed to make because they don't have the concepts of building and understanding yet. So they start small. They start with Duplo, simple blocks. And to understand master planning and what you can do with it in D365, you kind of need to do that as well. You need to build those basic understanding of the concepts and configurations and where to apply which ones. So at the top, we have our master plans. You hear a lot of people will discuss and dictate that you should have a 1 or 2 plan strategy, and that should be static and dynamic, or maybe just 2 plans, one for your operations and one for a more simulation plan. That's a very simple, I think, way to look at it. There is the concept of static and dynamic master plans. You can have one master plan that serves both of those purposes. The information behind that is different. So a static plan, we can consider our long-term or operational plan. This is the plan we typically act out of. We firm planned orders from it. We review messages from it. It is at any point in time a snapshot of our operations and what we want to do and what master planning is suggesting we do. A dynamic plan is different, and one of the differences is in the way it regenerates. Typically, when you run a master schedule, when you run a master plan, you are generating planned orders. A static plan always regenerates fully. It takes all the information from scratch. Forget what yesterday had. Let's look at all the open orders, all the lead times, all the new information we have. New orders were placed, due dates were pushed, things were canceled. Let's look at everything from scratch and regenerate our static plan. A dynamic plan actually sees new demand in real time. You don't have to run the dynamic plan to see the new demand. And when you do run against a dynamic plan, you have the ability to not just run a full regeneration, but maybe run a net change. I only want to see how I'm affected by new orders that came in. So there's a little bit of flexibility with a dynamic plan. You often see them used for short-term simulations. You see them if you need to use functionality like explosions, which I'll talk about later. So there is that concept of the 1 and 2 plan, but you shouldn't be limited to that. You can have as many master plans as you need, and they can all be used for different purposes. Maybe one is a plan that considers forecasts. Maybe one is a plan that just level loads for production. And then there's another one that considers everything: on-hand inventory, sales quotes, forecasts, etc. You can have master plans that fit different needs for your S&OP processes. So don't be limited by the 1 and 2 plan concept. It's really, what do you need your master plans to do and how do you configure them? We also have a change I'll talk about later with how master planning can now be run, which might change how you want to configure and how many plans you have. Then you have forecast plans. Do we consider forecasts? Yes or no? Pretty simple, right? Do we want to consider our forecasted orders to drive our master plan and drive what our teams are going to firm up in their production schedules and their purchase plans? We then go down to our coverage groups and item coverage. These are the first two key setups you need to understand. A coverage group is applied to an item. You can have a default coverage group for all items, or you can discretely assign a coverage group to an item. And what that coverage group does is it defines the general planning parameters. What are our horizons, our time fences of how far out we plan? Do we consider forecasts? Do we want to see suggested messages on how to alter our existing orders? The time fences is a big piece because you're going to cater that to your lead times. How do you actually want to set up your time fence? If you're using the standard deprecated master planning engine, a lot of times you needed those time fences to be shorter in order for master planning to run in an efficient manner. You didn't want it running for many hours, so you tried to limit the times it ran. A lot of people will say you want it to be as long as your lead times, but that's in a just-in-time sort of fashion. Typically, you want some buffer. It is the lead time plus a percentage in order to actually capture the demand and time to place your orders and meet some variability in the supply chain. So coverage groups are those grouping settings. Align those with how you want to plan groups of products. Then you have item coverage, the next level, the most granular level in the hierarchy. I want to set these parameters for this item and maybe even this item at this warehouse. This independent warehouse as part of one legal entity has different planning settings than when I'm using it at other warehouses or sites. And then on my right side here, I have basic functionality. If I'm configuring some of those building blocks of master planning, what can I do? What can I build? Well, one, I can use safety stock journals. Safety stock journals give us the ability to calculate minimum inventory levels. They give us the ability to suggest what our safety stock level should be. We have actions and calculated delays. These are messages that master planning can produce to tell you should expedite an order or cancel an order or modify an order, whether that's by a quantity or a date, because there's been changes in the supply chain. The big thing about those messages is you want to configure them so they make sense. Some people configure them because they're told to, and then they get contradictory messages that tell you to both cancel something and expedite it at the same time. So you need to be knowledgeable about what you want those messages to do. Are you really going to take action on those messages, or are they purely there as a secondary look and you're going to manage your planned orders appropriately? So we get by those building blocks and we say, what else can we do? We want to use this new ERP to drive efficiencies in our business. We want to grow the business. We want all of the functionality that's available. We don't want 5 different third-party tools to do forecasting and master planning and drag and drop scheduling and all these different things. So what else is available out of the box? One is production scheduling, and this could be looked at as materials planning or resource planning or even capacity planning, planning to our work centers and our assembly cells, understanding if we have enough material to produce things when we want to produce them. And then how do we actually plan? Do we plan just in time? Do we plan to the customer expected ship date, or do we want to ship as early as possible? A lot of that needs to tie into our overall operations plan and our inventory levels. And then when we're doing that, how do we find out that information? Explosions is one tool that allows us to see upstream and downstream in the supply chain. This is something I'll show in the demo. It's a very powerful tool, often used in configure to order scenarios or capable to promise, where I say, I have this produced item. I need to blow through the bills of materials or the formula. I need to understand the capacity on labor side and tell me, what can I build? Do I have materials now? If not, are they on existing orders? If not, what do I need to plan for and how much and when do I need to plan for? Then you might have really large companies. When you get into intercompany master planning, you want the ability to see demand from another facility in real time. You don't want to wait for them to firm up a planned purchase order into a purchase order for an intercompany sale, and then you're reacting too late. If you're in a company that's really large and you're using a global planner scenario, I might be doing both sides of the equation. I might be firming that supply to turn into the demand that we're going to ship out of another facility. So I can see that demand ahead of somebody actually acting on a planned order with intercompany master planning. I can do intercompany forecasting with statistical demand forecasting when I have intercompany master planning and different buy-sell relationships with all of my legal entities. And statistical demand forecasting, that's a tool that's been around since AX 2012 R3, but has really evolved here in Dynamics 365. It's backed by Azure Machine Learning, and it offers a group of statistical models out of the box to do forecasting based on historical data in the ERP. So do we use ARIMA or exponential smoothing or seasonal trend decomposition to forecast future demand and be able to have that drive our master plans as well? And then these last two bullets are what's new, what's exciting in master planning, where is it going next? Planning optimization is a service that has now replaced the old master planning engine. And the first piece of this is technical. It's no longer running on your server, on the same server you're logged into as a user, bogging down the system by pinging the sales table and the purchase table and the rec trans table and draining all of the resources on your server. It's running as an offline service. So what does that mean? Well, it means we don't have to run regeneration plans at night or every week, or depending on our volume, that could run for 3, 4, 5 hours in an old environment. With planning optimization, that could be down to minutes now. You could be running master plans as often as you need to as collaborative planners in real time to react to fluctuations that are happening. You don't need to wait overnight. You can operate in a 24-hour environment. It introduces all sorts of possibilities for us as consultants and planners. Do we now have 10 master plans that are all configured perfectly to the different scenarios we want to simulate, and we can run them in real time? Do I have really long lead times or bombs 10 levels deep that I need to run MRP for? Planning optimization gives us that ability with just the pure infrastructure change. But it also now starts driving other functionality like DDMRP, demand-driven MRP, instead of the traditional kind of direct demand-driven functionality that we have where things are coupled together. I get a sales order that drives production, that drives purchasing, and so on. Here, we are decoupling demand. We are finding out what are the critical buffer levels and stocking levels we want to have to handle fluctuations in the supply chain, and using a true reorder point strategy, or choosing a priority-based scheduling system instead of the traditional date-driven master planning planned orders that you see in the standard master planning engine. So we looked at basic building blocks. We've looked at complex builds. This all sounds great, but so far we're just talking. So why don't we go ahead and get into the demo? Okay, so now we're in D365. Let's take a look at some of these tools. The first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to navigate to my recent selection. I'm going to choose this master planning workspace. I've actually already pre-configured this. If you're not familiar with workspaces, you need to be, whether it's master planning, purchasing, production, any role you have in Dynamics, you should be using workspaces to make the most efficient use of the system. You can have your personalized, tailored experience, your dashboards, everything right here. So why am I using this workspace today? Well, one, I've already created a few tiles of important information. If I'm a planner, one of the first things I'm going to do every day when I'm doing my job is look at my planned orders. What planned orders are specifically for me? So I have this tile, it's already configured and filtered. That's the really important thing. Master planning throws a lot of information at you. Filters are hugely important. It's understanding the basic advanced filter sort and save views of Dynamics will save you a lot of efforts in just narrowing down the information to what's important. So you saw I went from a tile to this kind of ironed out or drilled down list of orders. There's a couple filters I have. One is the buyer group. I want to focus on the items that belong to me, the vendors that belong to me. I don't want to see the 10,000 planned orders that are generated when master planning runs. So I, one, always recommend you filter by your buyer group. Two, your order date. It might not matter what the delivery date is something. That's based on the lead time. When do I need to order it by? What are the things that are due right now or past due? Filter by your order date. That's really important. It makes your life a lot easier. You can filter on date ranges. Don't waste your time thinking you need to review every planned order that's in the system. What do you need to do right now? And if it's not right now, when do you need to do it? So I have a couple of filters already here, and you can see as I change more, it's asking me if I want to update or save a new view that I can have. And that's how I kind of drill my planned personalized experience in the master planning workspace. So I have my planned orders. I'm going in to review them. I want to see, why is it telling me to make this Lego mug kit? Why is it telling me I need to produce this? And why is it telling me I need to do it next week? And what are all these planned purchase parts? So there's a couple things I can do. One is I can just look at that planned order and I can navigate down to a section that shows the pegging. The pegging essentially is matching demand to supply. I have a planned production order to make this Lego mug kit because this isn't one part, this is many parts. So why do I need to make this? It looks like I have a safety stock level of 500 pieces that's already past due. I'm out of stock. I need to make more. So I can see that it's pegged to make at least 500 of these. Now, I might want to say, well, when could I do this by? Immediately from this screen. When can I make this Lego mug kit? What am I missing? Are there parts I need? What's going on? Well, I could look at this requirement profile. That's more important when I'm looking at the total view of an item versus a single order. It's going to show you a lot of information. So we'll come back to this one, but you can still see that pegging concept applies. Really what I want to look at is the explosion. I mentioned that can show a lot of information. So we know we have a planned production order to make 500 of these. And this is another one of those screens that when I look at it, it's kind of messy, a lot of information. So let me step back. Let me personalize this screen. I want to make it a little bit easier for me as a planner to understand it. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to take this description and I'm going to drop it up here. And the reason for that is I want to align it with the data I'm seeing. I want to know what each of these means at quick glance in case I forget. So, okay, I have product name, item number, warehouse. This is my quantity I need. This is what's covered. I have an order date. I even have the number. So great. Planned purchase order, planned production order. Here's my planned production order 0148343. And I have the reference type. I know how this line in the explosion is going to be fulfilled. I know I need to make this Lego mug kit, and underneath that, I don't have any Santa hats. Well, okay, so no Santa hats. I don't have any Lego legs. I have the beard. Okay, so I don't have the Lego Santa body, but I have the beard. I have the Santa hat. Here's a planned batch order to build the body. I have the Lego helicopter I still need to build. Typically, if that was a subassembly, I might see more information here. I might see another kind of triangle caret and another level of bill of materials if that was also a built item and we had a planned production order for it. Now, if I already had a scheduled production order, if I already firmed up this planned production into a production order, or there was an existing order, this would say production order here. So as soon as that's no longer planned, it would show like this one. It would be unbolded essentially, and it would say that there's existing order scheduled to end on the 23rd, and that's going to cover my source of demand. So it's bolding essentially all the things I still need to plan for. So it's a really, really powerful form. The other thing about it is you can get to other screens from here. So I can see upstream and downstream. Right now I'm exploding the bomb, but maybe I forgot, wait, where did this come from? What am I looking at this planned production order for? Oh, okay, yeah, this rolls up to safety stock demand. It doesn't roll up to another assembly or a sales order or a forecast. I need to build this for safety stock. So maybe that one's not as important. It's safety stock, it's not a customer order. I can do things like approve or complete that planned order to say I reviewed it, but I'm not going to firm it right now. I'm going to come back to it because it's not priority. So lots of different things I can do, and I can kind of have a custom output in this screen to filter and view why I have those transactions. But let's say I did go ahead and I like this order. I want to go ahead and firm it. It's actually going to put that in my production schedule. And when it comes to firming production, you can see here you might get an error. So I have an error, and this says, My item hasn't been fully set up. So that's probably a problem, right? I can't plan for an item that's not fully set up. So we'll ignore the planned production order and we'll use a planned purchase order. We'll try to firm one of those, see if we get the same error. And we do. All right, so let's ixnay the Legos. Let's find another item. The intent here is to show you when you firm a planned order, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get a real order out of it. If I look at this enclosure and I firm this, it's a planned purchase order and there's a vendor applied, that's going to now become a live purchase order. It's going to disappear from this list and it's going to become a purchase order in my system. And if I navigate to master planning, I'd be able to see that somebody actually did that. If I go to my inquiries and reports, I run master planning, I click on firming history here, and we select the plan we firmed it from, which for me was my static plan and the date. Here we go. I just firmed this M0005 into a purchase order. It became purchase order 1680. So there's full traceability that I, as a planner, reviewed that plan purchase order and firmed it, and it's now a live PO. And as we can see here, here it is. It's a purchase order for tailspin parts. So what did we learn so far? Well, one, filtering is really important. I'm going to go into that planned order screen. I'm going to see a lot of information, but I can get to information I need that's really, really useful, like the explosion. Let's take it one step further. Let's look at the other most commonly used form that you're going to have as a planner in Dynamics, which is your net requirements or your planning profile. So I'm going to navigate to the plan tab for my Lego mug kit, and we're going to take a look at the net requirements and my static plan. So once again, you can have many different plans. They can be configured for lots of different reasons. All right, so this item just has one requirement. The top part of this form is actually showing setup. It's showing that there's a minimum stocking level of 500 pieces. It's showing which warehouse I'm analyzing or reviewing the plan for. It's showing that it's a produced item versus a purchased item. And it's showing me what plan is out there. There's a planned production order that's pegged to our minimum stocking level. Well, let's go down and take a look at something else that's used in the BOM version for the mug kit. Let's look at one of those purchase parts. Can we see the demand on the hat or the body or one of these piece parts? So go to the Lego Santa hat and we'll take a look at planned orders as well. Do we have a simple example or do we have something more complicated? All right, so another one that's pretty simple, one line, just the one demand. There's no safety stock for this item. This is a purchase item. This has a different coverage group, and the only demand out there is for it to be consumed into a BOM line. So we actually have 1,000 units on hand, which can cover that demand for 500. And we have a planned purchase order out there for 500 more. So eventually we'll get to a total of 1,000 if all those things take place, right? And 1,000 on hand now, we use 5,000, buy 5,000 more, we'll leave it out there. So we start to see a little bit more information on this items view, and we can see where it will go. But the other part of this form, people I think sometimes only look at these two levels. What site and warehouse am I reviewing and what are the transactions? This is all very granular. This is one by one. This is transaction. If I'm a planner, I need to be thinking more than just my daily exercises. I need to think months ahead. I need to think years ahead. I need to consider what my vendors can do, what production can do, and figure out if we need to change things up. So that's where these other tabs really come into play and provide a lot of useful information. So your item coverage tab will show you more setups in case you forgot, because who's going to remember 10,000 different parts and their lead times and how long we plan them for. So I can see this item is using a coverage period, coverage code of type period for 20 days. So what does that mean? Well, we see a BOM line down here for 500. There was another BOM line down here for another 500, and it fell within the same 20-date range as 223. So from today's date, those would fall together. I wouldn't get two planned purchase orders of 500 each. I'd get one. It would sum the demand over that 20 days to say, hey, there's X number of units for this particular Santa hat over 20 days. Here's one planned order to fill all of that. Now, it'll still take into consideration if you do have minimum and maximum order limits and break those up. But in general, it's trying to sum that up so you're not wasting time looking at transactions one by one, because you probably buy in bulk, you probably produce in bulk. You're not going to firm a planned order for 1 unit or 20 units or whatever it might be. We can see how far out we plan. We can see the vendor. We can see if we do have any min-max or standard order quantities. And then further to the right, this is where we get a lot of information for the future. I want summary information. I don't want this middle section that's detailed. I want summary. I have 1,000 on hand. I have nothing in any type of forecast. I have 500 total inventory, 500 total planned purchase orders. The more transactions here, all of that's going to aggregate up to the top part of the form. And then the period is where we might want to look at different buckets. I have a period template set out right now where I look at the next 5 days, day by day. So I can plan to short term. And then after that, I look at weeks. And then after that, I look at months. So I can actually see projected available inventory at any time in different customizable time formats. And if I want, I can actually get that in a graphical format as well. So we can look at what an individual item's projection would be. So net requirements, one of the most powerful forms. You'll see a ton of information in there. Back to the master planning module itself. I started in my workspace, and one of the common tiles or out-of-the-box tiles you see configured in a workspace is actions or calculated delays. These are those messages I mentioned. If I click on actions, I can see all sorts of actions that could occur. Advance, expedite something, right? This purchase order is late. We already needed this item. We never placed a purchase order. Advance this X number of days. Postpone, push something out. A customer delayed. We no longer need to make something when we originally planned it for, or we never need to buy something that we originally were going to purchase it for. We can postpone something. Then you have your quantities, your increases, your decreases, your cancellations. All of these are suggestions based on the information and the data that's in the system, which is really important. You always hear garbage in, garbage out. Your planning data is critical for this system to produce planned orders and messages that make sense. You don't have to react to all these messages. In some cases, it's saying, hey, you need to postpone production because there's a capacity issue. It doesn't know that you can take 5 people from night shift, throw them on day shift, give a bunch of people overtime and overcome that. So that's why it's not automatically recalculating and regenerating these orders. It's telling you what actions you have available to you. Do you expedite? Do you postpone? Do you advance? Do you come up with another solution? It's forcing you to plan and focus on the exceptions rather than all the easy stuff we can automate. And finally, let's do one more little bit of demo here, and that's going to be the demand forecasting functionality. So I'm not going to run a demand forecast, but I can show an adjusted demand forecast. And this is a demand forecast that's generated using Azure Machine Learning, and it's returning a forecast for these items. You can see there's bolded values here. That's because there's functionality that when a user edits a forecast before they commit this to master planning, we want to note that. It's not the system generated forecast that came from the system. Bold means a user edited it. So that could be really important. I might want to see that. If I go to demand forecast lines here, I can actually see what the original quantities were and what was edited by the user who might have taken any individual manipulation. I might also want to see, where did this forecast come from? The one I'm looking at happens to be at an item allocation key level rather than an item level. If I click this forecast line details, it's going to give me all of the history that went into the calculation of that forecast, what my historical demand was over my forecasted time periods, what my forecast was at that time, how accurate it is, what model it used, and all this great information that I need if I want to commit this forecast plan to my master plan. So really, really useful, powerful functionality embedded now in D365. So as you can see, D365 has a ton of great functionality. We didn't even get to some of the best part, which, for example, is this bonus piece, the supply schedule. Check out some of my information after this session or follow up with a question on about it. A really another powerful, useful form to do aggregate planning. So to recap, what did we learn today? You start with the basic, build your building blocks, understand master plans, coverage groups, item coverage, how to configure messages, figure out how to use buyer groups and consolidate and planning your items, figure out what is your strategy. What are you as a business trying to do? Are you building an S&OP process? Are you just building to a forecast? Are you trying to resolve short-term problems in the supply chain? Do you want forecasts to be fed to your master plans? And then finally, base those configurations on that fulfillment approach. Are you configured to order? Do you need multiple master plans for simulations? Do you have long lead time items? Do you have multi-source vendors that need to be considered in your planning scenarios? Do you have engineer to order scenarios? All of these are important considerations in a master plan. So make sure you do your due diligence and do your testing and continue to play well with Lego. So as you can see, there's lots of great functionality, and we're just scratching the surface here in this session. If you want to follow up with me or you have questions, here's my contact details, and I'm going to stay on for a live Q&A. Thanks, DynamicsCon.